was one of those nights where the world outside feels like it's holding its breath, that deep, suffocating quiet that presses down on you, heavy as a shroud you can't shrug off, no matter how you twist in the sheets. I'd been lying there in the pitch black, eyes locked on the ceiling fan up above, its blades slicing through the stale air with this lazy, almost mocking rhythm, like they were murmuring secrets I never asked to hear, secrets that clawed at the edges of my mind. My name's Elena, and at 42, I'd carved out a kind of expertise in solitude, the sharp-edged kind that comes from betrayal and too many empty rooms echoing back your own sighs. The divorce had been 3 years ago now, a clean slice that left me with this house, a squat, two-story colonial hunkered on the frayed outskirts of Elmwood, its floors groaning underfoot like old bones, its windows chattering in the wind like teeth on the verge of shattering. It was meant to be my sanctuary, my do-over. No more raised voices bouncing off the walls like accusations. No more footsteps that belonged to someone else haunting the halls. Just me, hunkered over my laptop in the upstairs spare room, editing manuscripts for faceless clients, with the glow of the screen as my only steady companion, and the occasional greasy takeout box staring back from the nightstand like a guilty secret. But that night, creeping up on 3 in the morning, it all unraveled with a knock that sliced right through the hush, deliberate and unyielding, 3 sharp thuds that landed like blows to the gut. Thud, thud, thud. My heart lurched up into my throat before my mind could even scramble to catch up, a rush of heat flooding my face, my neck, making my skin prickle hot and alive with something primal. I shot upright in bed, the sheets coiling around my legs like they had a mind of their own, trying to drag me back down into the dark. The digital clock on the nightstand burned 3:07 into the gloom, those red numbers glaring like an accusation, mocking the impossibility of it all. Who in God's name knocks at 3 a.m.? And here, in this drowsy little suburb where the most excitement is old Mrs. Hargrove's tabby upending the garbage bins under cover of night, scattering regrets like yesterday's headlines, I went rigid, my breath coming in these shallow, jagged pulls that barely filled my lungs, every nerve ending straining into the silence, waiting for the world to betray me again. This house was ancient, erected back in the 1920s, or so the realtor had droned on with that salesman's smile when I signed the papers, and it had its own symphony of creaks and sighs, the kind you learn to tune out like white noise, the timbers settling with a low groan as the temperature dropped, the refrigerator downstairs droning on like a hive of angry insects plotting in the walls. But this was different, solid, insistent, the unmistakable impact of knuckles or flesh against wood, carrying weight and intent that made my stomach twist into knots. Then it came again, those 3 knocks, but slower now, almost measured, like whatever was out there had all the time in the world. Thud, thud, thud. The vibration hummed up through the floorboards, tingling into the soles of my bare feet where I stood now, toes instinctively curling against the icy hardwood, as if gripping the grain could anchor me against the rising tide of panic. Go away, I breathed to the empty room, the words slipping out more plea than command, my voice a fragile thread that barely disturbed the air. Saying it aloud felt like tempting fate, like acknowledging the monster under the bed by shining a light on it. But I couldn't stop the habit, that desperate ritual of the alone. I eased toward the bedroom door, fingers trembling as they curled around the knob, turning it slow so the hinges wouldn't wail their protest, opening it just a sliver to peer into the hallway. It stretched out before me like a black tunnel, swallowing light and shape alike, the kind of darkness that plays tricks, turning familiar corners into yawning voids. Down at the far end waited the front door, that heavy oak barrier I'd fortified with an extra deadbolt after Mark packed his bags and left me picking up the shards. He'd always ribbed me about it, that easy laugh of his cutting through my nerves. Still got those city jitters, huh, Elena? Elmwood safer than your mama's apple pie. Safe. What a joke that word tasted like now, bitter on my tongue. The knocking resumed, right there at the front door, but it felt nearer somehow, as if the sound had slithered through the cracks in the walls, burrowing closer to my skin. Thud, thud, thud. My pulse roared in my ears, a wild, erratic thunder that overpowered everything else, making the room tilt just a little. I crept down the stairs on feet that felt too heavy, too loud, each riser a small betrayal in the hush, my palm sliding along the banister for balance, its wood smooth and cool under my touch, a faint lifeline against the vertigo of fear. The air thickened as I descended, growing dense and cloying, laced with the house's familiar mustiness, damp plaster breathing out its age, the sharp tang of old varnish that always lingered after rain, but undercut now by something earthier, wetter, like soil freshly turned under a midnight sky. My bare soles whispered against the threadbare runner rug, and I flinched at every soft slap, convinced the shadows were listening. Eyes glinting from the corners, I halted at the bottom landing, chest rising and falling in ragged heaves, my hand hovering over the light switch like it was a grenade pin. Don't pull it. Don't announce yourself. Don't become the beacon in the black instead. I ghosted toward the door, the peephole a narrow spyglass into the night beyond, and pressed my eye to it, the metal rim biting cold into my skin like a warning. Out there, the porch light hung dead, bulb long since given up the ghost, and the street dissolved into nothingness, the sodium street lamps pooling feeble yellow halos on the deserted pavement, empty as a forgotten promise. No engine rumbling at the curb, no silhouette hunched against the autumn bite, just the wind teasing the ancient oaks, their branches raking the stars with skeletal desperation. Empty, bone deep, empty. Yet the knocking persisted, refusing to be denied, shifting its assault, not on the door now, but skirting its edges, a slow, deliberate scratch along the frame, like nails raking wood in long, exploratory drags that set my teeth on edge. My breath fogged the glass inside the peephole, blurring the view for a heartbeat, and I recoiled, heart lodged high and hammering, a sour taste of bile rising in my throat. Who's there? The words cracked out of me, a whisper shout that ricocheted off the foyer walls, too loud in the stifling quiet. The silence that answered was vast, taunting, wrapping around me like fingers closing slow. Then, filtering through the wood, a low murmur, not quite words, more a susurrus carried on the breeze, or perhaps the neighbor's late-night television seeping through like smoke. I wanted to believe that, needed to, but a deeper part of me, the part honed by lonely nights and half-remembered dreams, recognized the lie. This house had been murmuring to me almost since the moving truck pulled away. Subtle at first, a floorboard sighing under no weight, a shadow pooling too long in the periphery of my vision. Gone when I turned, I dismissed it as echoes of the divorce, the grief gnawing at my edges like termites in the walls. But this felt sharper, more intimate, like a breath hot against the nape of my neck. I staggered back, palms slick with a sudden sweat that chilled as it cooled, and groped for my phone on the hall table, fingers clumsy, nails scraping wood. 312 the screen mocked, and worse, no signal bars, just that cursed flicker of nothing in this backwater corner of nowhere. I punched in 911 anyway, the emergency tone beeping faint and futile, before dissolving into static hiss, like the line itself was laughing at me. Come on, damn it, I hissed through clenched teeth, thumb stabbing redial in frantic rhythm. Dead air. The scratching intensified, circling the door now like a beast probing for the soft underbelly, testing seams and hinges with patient malice. Tap, tap, tap on the narrow window to the side, the glass quivering under the assault, sending tiny tremors up my arm where I braced against the wall. I could feel it in my molars, that low-frequency buzz that crawled under the skin, raising hackles I didn't know I had left. My thoughts splintered. Burglar casing the joint, wrong address in the dark, some lost soul stumbling from the dive bar on Main Street, 3 sheets to the wind and twice as mean. But Elmwood wasn't built for that. It was a place of locked doors out of rote politeness, not the gut-deep dread coiling in my belly now. I retreated into the living room, collapsing onto the couch in a heap, knees hiked up to my chest like a child warding off the bogeyman with sheer will. The room carried the ghost of yesterday's coffee, stale and grounding in its bitterness, but it couldn't mask the onslaught from the hall. Knock, scratch, knock. The sounds wove together into a perverse cadence, burrowing into my skull like worms through soft earth, sinking with the frantic tattoo of my heart until the line blurred. Was that my pulse out there, or something mimicking it to draw me closer? I clamped my hands over my ears, nails biting crescents into my scalp, but the noise seeped through anyway, insidious, pressing behind my eyes until hot tears welled, spilling silent down my cheeks. Why me? Why this endless aching now? I'd chosen this exile, bricked myself in after Mark shouldered out the door with half our life in a duffel, and that crooked grin that used to melt me but now just burned. You gotta let it go, Elena. He tossed over his shoulder that last night, key ring jangling like chains. Let go. As if loneliness was a garment I could slip off, fold away in a drawer, instead of this skin I've grown into, tight and scarred. Time lost its shape in that vigil, minutes stretching to hours, or the other way around, the night outside lightening to a sullen, bruised gray that filtered through the curtains like smoke from a dying fire. The knocking ebbed with the false dawn, retreating to a phantom ache in my bones. But sleep, that was a luxury long fled. When the sun finally muscled over the rooftops, casting its watery pallor across the floors, I hauled myself upright on legs gone numb and rubbery and shuffled to the door, turning the locks with hands that still trembled. No muddy prints scarring the porch boards, no gouges marring the paint like accusations, just the welcome mat beaded with dew, heavy and sodden, and that lingering whiff of disturbed earth, as if someone or something had been turning the soil nearby, unearthing what should stay buried. A laugh bubbled up then, brittle and raw, scraping my throat like broken glass, imagination running wild, deadline stress boiling over into hallucinations. That's the story I'd feed myself over the coming hours, spooning it down with black coffee that scalded my tongue but warmed the hollows inside. Yet as I stood there in the kitchen, mug clutched like a talisman, steam curling up to sting my eyes, I couldn't dispel the sensation of eyes on me, boring in from the corners of the room, patient and unblinking. The house felt altered, weightier, the air laced with an oppression that settled on my shoulders like a lover's hand turned possessive, too tight to breathe easy. I forced myself through the day, fingers flying over keys in the upstairs office, but my gaze darted to the windows every few breaths, half braced for a face to bloom in the reflection, pale and insistent. Evening crept in on thief's feet, exhaustion tugging at my limbs like lead weights, but bed was a battlefield I refused to surrender. I triple-checked the locks, the rasp of the deadbolt sliding home a small comfort, then wedged the straight-backed chair from the dining room under the front doorknob, its legs biting into the floor with a satisfying scrape. The peephole became my sentinel, that dark circle, a constant stare-down with the encroaching night. Darkness fell with a sigh, insidious and velvet soft, the clock's hands crawling toward 3 like fingers on a noose. I burrowed into bed, quilts drawn high to my chin, the fabric rough against my skin, listening to the house's nocturnal pulse, the refrigerator's distant buzz, the crickets outside weaving their fragile chorus against the chill. My body throbbed with pent-up tension, muscles coiled like springs on the verge of shattering, every shallow inhale tasting of dust and dread, and then, precise as a curse, it began anew. Thud, thud, thud. The impacts rang louder, fiercer, rattling the doorframe in its joints, sending a shiver through the walls that I felt in my teeth. I jackknifed up, a gasp tearing from my chest, the air metallic with the sharp edge of fear coating my tongue. Not again. Oh God, please, not again. The plea looped in my head, frantic, as if words alone could ward it off. This time, hesitation cracked. I couldn't just cower. I lunged for the closet, snatching Mark's old Louisville slugger from where it leaned forgotten in the corner, its taped grip familiar and rough under my palm, a relic of better days at backyard barbecues. Gripping it two-handed, white-knuckled, I descended the stairs once more, each step a thunder in my ears, the bat's weight a poor shield against the shadows that seemed to lean in, curious, seconds. The air plunged colder as I hit the ground floor, carrying that primal reek stronger now. Wet earth churned and dark, overlaid with a sickly sweetness, like funeral lilies wilting in the rain, their petals curling black. Goose flesh erupted across my arms, as if phantom fingertips were tracing icy paths down my flesh, deliberate and slow. At the door, I leaned in close, cheek flush to the wood, its grain pressing cool patterns into my skin, and strained to hear beyond the roar of my own breath. Silence, mocking. Then a voice, muffled and distant, as if bubbling up from deep water, choked with silt. Elena. Ice flooded my veins, seizing every vessel, my blood turning sluggish and cold. No one out there knew my name. No one knew I rattled around this place solo, a ghost in my own life. Who is it? I challenged, forcing steel into my voice, the bat hoisted high, though my arms quaked with the effort. The quiet stretched thin, taut as piano wire, humming with threat. Then the knocks resumed, gentler, almost entreating. Thud, thud, and with them the voice sharpened, threading through the cracks. Let me in, it's cold. The bat slipped from my numb fingers, clanging to the floor with a boom that echoed like judgment day in the confines of the foyer. Cold? Who the hell was freezing their ass off out there in just a thin flannel and jeans against the November bite? My mind reeled, twisted prank from bored kids, Mark slinking back, hat in hand, after one too many regrets and whiskeys, but his timbre was gravelly, salesman smooth with that drawl. This was softer, layered with a vulnerability that tugged at something buried feminine, edged with a tremor that echoed like a half-forgotten dream. I didn't unchain the door. Hell no. That threshold stayed sealed, a vow I wouldn't break. Instead, I bolted upstairs, chest burning, barricading the bedroom with the heavy oak dresser, shoving it across the threshold until my shoulders screamed and sweat beaded cold on my brow. But the knocking pursued, nomadic and relentless, shifting to the back door with a hollow rap that vibrated through the kitchen pipes, then to the side window where branches scraped glass like accusations, scratch scratch on the exterior siding, tap tap insistent on the panes, each sound a pinprick building to a scream, and woven through it all, that whisper, persistent as a heartbeat. Elena, let me in. My heart battered my ribs in retaliation, each thud a bruise blooming inward, while sweat drenched my nightshirt, turning it clammy and heavy against my skin. The bedroom reeled in the dark, shadows contorting into malice, elongated claws unfurling from the closet, a stooped silhouette pooling at the bed's foot, waiting. Dawn clawed its way in eventually, a reluctant mercy, the voice slinking away with the night, leaving me gutted, eyes raw from tears I hadn't fully shed. I phoned in sick to the gig, my voice fracturing over the line as I mumbled excuses to my editor's voicemail. Family stuff came up. Won't be long, because how do you confess to specters over a corporate line? The day smeared into irrelevance, coffee curdling sour in my stomach, hands unsteady as I prowled the rooms, twisting locks I'd double-checked a dozen times over. I even stepped outside, circling the property like a convict mapping escape routes, the grass damp and yielding underfoot, no boot prints scarring the yard's soft loam, no claw marks raking the trim, just the wind weaving through the trees, a low dirge that mocked my unraveling nerves. Afternoon brought the gnaw of true paranoia, roots sinking deep into my thoughts. I fired up the car and pointed it toward the hardware depot in town, the radio murmuring banal forecasts of an approaching front, rain lashing in, temps plummeting, nothing to write home about for late fall. Hank, the clerk with his salt and pepper stubble and eyes that crinkled from too many small-town secrets, arched a bushy brow at my cart, gleaming new deadbolts, a motion-activated floodlight to banish the black, even a bargain bin security camera for the porch stoop. Running into some kind of home invasion drama, Elena, he drawled, punching keys with deliberate slowness. Something like that, I replied, the words sticking like tar, mustering a grin that felt like it might shatter my jaw. Back at the house, I wrestled the installs solo, screwdriver slipping in blistered palms until blood welled warm and coppery, the cam's red LED winking to life like a cyclops eye over the threshold. There, proof on demand, footage to dissect and debunk. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with a grimy sleeve, whispering the lie to myself, rational, in control. But as the sun bled out in streaks of bruised orange and violet across the sky, that subterranean scent wormed back in, oozing under the door sills like insidious mist, turning the air thick and tainted. Sleep abandoned me utterly that third night. I perched in the living room instead, laptop balanced on knees drawn tight, volume jacked high, the bat a faithful sentinel at my side. The clock ticked mercilessly to 2:58, my mouth parching to dust, tongue cleaving to the roof like I'd gargled with gravel. 3 o'clock sharp, nothing, just the hush mocking my vigil. 3:01, and the floodlight blazed alive outside, its stark beam carving the darkness, flooding the porch in merciless white. Empty, save for leaves tumbling like startled vermin across the weathered planks. Relief hit me then, a shaky wave that loosened my death grip on the couch arm, fleeting as a sigh. Then the feed stuttered, static snow veiling the screen for a breathless instant, before snapping clear and framed there, a form, indistinct, edges feathering like smoke, but unmistakably human in its slump. Lithe build, head bowed in supplication, palms flattened to the storm door's glass. In silent entreaty, I slapped the laptop lid down with a crack that split the air, breath erupting from me in a choked sob that tasted of terror. No, that couldn't. Glitch, lens flare, digital ghost. But when I pried it open again, pulse jackhammering against my temples, the frame stood vacant. The timestamp log blinked coldly, motion detected at 3:03, 3 minutes, 3 knocks. The symmetry hooked into me, irrational yet ironclad, a pattern that promised no escape. I might have missed the knocking that night, or perhaps it drowned beneath the tempest in my skull, the cyclone of doubts and what-ifs whipping through my thoughts. What if I cracked that door? Just a sliver. What if it wasn't some intruder, but a fractured piece of myself out there, shivering, clawing for re-entry? The notion slithered in, ludicrous on the surface, but adhesive, spawned from endless nights lost in true crime rabbit holes, and the solitude that ferments sanity into something fouler. Morning found me a shell, shadows like thumbprints under my eyes, skin sallow and slick in the bathroom mirror's unforgiving glare. I looked ravaged, cheekbones jutting sharp from days of forgotten meals, a stranger wearing my face. That's when the digging started. Not metaphorical anymore, but literal. A frantic bid for distraction or vindication. Elmwood's library squatted downtown, a relic with its basement warren of archives where the Historical Society squirreled away brittle deeds and faded clippings like dragon's hordes. I killed the day there, hacking coughs through reams of microfiche. The basement air a choking fog of mildew and oxidized ink that clawed at my throat. The property at 1427 Oak Lane, my prison now, had traded owners like a hot potato since its birth in 1923. Mill hands scraping by, a war widow in the post-war haze, a boisterous clan of 6 through the Reagan years zilch, until a faded headline from 32 leaped out. Local woman vanishes after storm. Margaret Hale, 38 and widowed, last spotted slipping into her home, same damn address, as a gale howled through the hollows. Neighbors reported knocking and cries piercing the tempest, but the door stood fast, unbreached, no chaos within, no corpse ever surfaced. Runaway, the verdict read. File shelved in the cold, nausea roiled in my gut, the text swimming on the flickering screen as if underwater knocking. Night, solitude, echoes of my own unraveling, or the house's hungry legacy, devouring lone women, regurgitating their terrors until the mind fractures. I barked a laugh on the drive home, windows cranked down to scour my lungs with crisp gusts, but the doubt had taken root, thorny and insistent. That night, as rain drummed the roof in erratic Morse, I slipped into a dream that felt too vivid for slumber. Margaret at my threshold, gown sodden and translucent, eyes scooped hollow and spilling rainwater in endless sheets. Let me in, Elena, her lips shaped, silent amid the thunder's roar. I jolted awake, sheets strangled around me, the inside of my cheek raw and bloody from teeth sunk deep. The knocking surged back with vengeance, as if my meddling had provoked it. Thuds pounding the frame until dust trickled from the transom like spectral ash, fine and gray. I thumbed the cam feed. There it was, the shape honed sharper in the deluge, rain sluicing down its contours, smearing features into merciful blur, but not the raw desperation of its stance. Hands starfished on the glass, nails etching screams into the pain that keened through the speakers. It's you, I murmured to the glowing screen, horror unfurling icy in my chest cavity. Not her ghost, mine. The slope of the shoulder, the sodden drape of hair, dark and heavy, mirroring my own post-shower tangle, but aged somehow, leaner to the point of frailty, eyes lifting to meet the lens, my eyes, but bruised with shadows, imploring in silent agony. I crushed the laptop shut, plastic groaning under my grip, and lunged to the nearest window, wrenching the curtain aside with fingers gone claw-like. Rain sheeted the glass in furious waves, wind keening like a mourner denied, but the porch gaped empty under the floodlight's erratic sweep, beam-hacking shadows into fleeing wraiths. Downstairs, the assault mutated, thuds now emanating from the basement door off the kitchen, deep and subterranean, like something colossal shifting against stone. My feet pounded slick tiles as I hurtled down, breath scorching my lungs, that grave scent overwhelming, now laced with putrescence, meat gone rancid under summer sun. The door shuddered in its frame, knob ratcheting with languid intent, as if savoring the anticipation. No, the word strangled from me, and I seized the closest chair, slamming it under the knob with a force that jarred my elbows, but the pounding endured, resonant and unyielding, a drag of weight across concrete that vibrated up through my bones. Scratch, scratch, nearer, as though taloned digits probed the barrier now, seeking purchase. I flattened into the corner, vertebrae grinding cold wall, my heartbeat a war chant thumping in my ears, drowning the storm. The basement chill seeped up, my exhalations blooming white ghosts, and the aroma peaked, lilies decaying in soil, the perfumed rot of an open casket. Unbidden, it yanked me back, not Mark's burial, he'd walked free, but Mother's, a decade gone, me solitary at the graveside, black earth sucking at my heels, lilies nodding solemn overhead. The door heaved once, twice, wood fraying at the seams with splintery cracks that split the night. My scream ripped free then, primal and unfiltered, propelling me up the stairs in a frenzy, two at a bound, before I barricaded the kitchen door with the table upended, chairs piled in haphazard bulwark. But the siege pressed on, sounds percolating through the structure, skittering along walls like infestation with intent, tapping overhead in the living room, scraping the hallway's confines. And the voice, Christ, the voice threading the chaos like barbed wire. Elena, why won't you let me in? It's so cold, so dark. I folded into the wreckage on the floor, rocking in the debris, tears carving hot paths down my face, salt mingling with the grit. I'm sorry, I wept to the void, to the ghosts of choices unmade. Sorry for the fracture with Mark, my silences that drove him into the arms of easier loves. Sorry for entombing sorrow in these walls, letting it suppurate like a wound ignored until infection bloomed. Sorry for turning deaf ear to the house's mutterings, the flickers in the gloom, until they sprouted fangs and hunger. The hours hemorrhaged into a pallid dawn, the gale fracturing to a petulant spit, the house lapsing into hush once more. But I knew, deep in the marrow, that the truce was illusion. It hungered still. The days that followed dissolved into a fog of sleeplessness and siege mentality. Calls went unanswered, my sister in Chicago's messages piling up, voice thick with that Midwestern concern. Elena, call back, you're scaring me with the silence. I couldn't summon the words, couldn't shape the horror into syllables that wouldn't shatter me further. I subsisted on protein bars that tasted of cardboard and coffee gone to sludge, pacing the perimeter like a beast in its den, bat in one fist, phone in the other, signal winking in and out like a cruel tease. The shattered cam yielded to a budget replacement, jury-rigged crookedly over the door, capturing only gusts and drizzle that night, or so the footage lied. On the fourth eve, the knocking transcended, shed its pleas for raw wrath, blows that quaked the foundation, windows juddering in sashes, framed photos tumbling from walls in cascades of shattered glass that glittered like accusations underfoot. Shards nicked my soles as I fled room to room, blood welling warm and adhesive, mingling with mud I'd dragged in from obsessive sweeps of the yard. The stench saturated now, grave blossom foulness embedding in fabric, hair, the very pores of my skin, until I retched over the sink, vomit acrid and scorching up my esophagus. In the basin's mirror, my reflection leered back, gaunt, feral-eyed, a doppelganger wearing decay like makeup. Her, Margaret's echo, my future self. I sought higher ground that night, scrambling to the attic, the pull-down ladder creaking under my weight like brittle bones, then yanking it up after me in a clangor of of aluminum, sealing the hatch like a tomb lid. Moonlight slanted through gable slits in silver knives, stirring dust motes into spectral ballet. The air stagnant with fiberglass itch that rasped my throat. Raw Mark's cast-offs loomed in cardboard sarcophagi. Albums of us frozen in youth, grins untroubled. His diploma from some forgotten state college, edges furled like dead leaves I wedged among them, fetal and shivering as the house below uttered low protests. The knocking ascended, methodical, thudding now on the hatch itself. Boom, 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 wood buckled, hinges shrieked in metallic agony, and the ladder tolled like a death knell as weight mounted the rungs. Heavy treads, sodden slaps of flesh on metal echoing up. Breath stuttered in my chest, lungs aflame as footfalls crested, deliberate, inexorable, trailing, wet promise. The hatch yawned inch by inch, lamplight from below fingering up like inquisitors, and silhouetted there, the intruder, dripping rivulets, reeking of loam and funeral florets, face veiled in snarled tresses, but recognition hit like a gut punch, the arch of the neck, the quiver in those outstretched hands. Me, decrepit iteration, flesh mottled and sagging like overripe harvest, yet unmistakably me, eyes locked on mine, my own, but socket-deep weeping crimson tears that traced meandering paths down hollowed cheeks. Elena, it grated, my timbre but eroded to grit and echo, the grave's rasp underscoring each syllable. Why did you leave me down there? I scuttled back, cartons toppling in avalanche, photographs spilling in riot. Mark and I, sun-dappled and whole, mother radiant under lilies on her wedding veil. The entity heaved through the breach, motions spasmodic, joints popping like dry tinder. The odor assailed. God, the reek, turned soil and dissolution, undercut by blood's sharp penny tang. Its gown, my gown from that inaugural nightmare, dangled in rags, caked with basement clay. You buried me. It husked, advancing quadrupedal, talons splintered and filth-crusted scraping boards. In the basement, after the fall, memory detonated. Not reverie, but verity, hammering home with brutal clarity. That final night with Mark, 3 years entombed in regret. I'd trailed him to the threshold, wine bottle clutched like a bludgeon, fury erupting from the fissures of our unraveling. Don't you dare leave me like this. The bottle swung wild, not connecting with him, but the newel post, exploding in a starburst that pitched me backward down the basement risers in the melee agony. Incandescent, ribs splintering, void rushing up to claim. Mark had wheeled, too late, summoned help, but the medics pronounced it swift, bleed internal and merciless. He'd interred the scandal with my remains, spinning the yarn of a solitary slip, tragic happenstance, flogged the house quick, vanished into fresh starts. The slab, basement floor, concrete slathered hasty over the evidence, for wayward spouses don't excavate in manicured lawns. No, that couldn't mesh. I breathed, I moved, I hurt, didn't I? The apparition pounced, digits chill and sodden snaring my ankle, hauling with unnatural vigor. I lashed out, heel smashing into pliant mass, a sodden crack resounding. It recoiled, ululating, a wail like rent fabric, my vocal cords mangled into torment. You can't flee eternally, it wheezed, lurching upright on quaking pins, forms swelling grotesque in the lunar wash. The cold, the dark, it hungers for you too. The garret world, confines contracting, dust strangling my shrieks. I groped blindly, bat absent here, fingers coiling on a loose plank, jagged and punitive. I arced it savagely, impact jarring to shoulder, bone yielding with a grind, ebony seepage spattering hot across my visage, salt and rust on my tongue, my essence distilled to venom. The thing reeled but clung, hobbling nearer, respiration gurgling phlegm in its thorax. Recall the lilies? Mother's pride. You sewed them over the scar to cloak it, but roots delve profound, Elena. They invariably breach. The space contracted to vertigo. Gable window a chill slab at my back. Deluge slick beyond. The specter towered, visage clarifying in the murk. My visage but pillaged. One orb tumid and sealed. Lips fissured and oozing. Let me in, it implored. Appendage proffered. Claws raking void, scant from my jugular. We're kin. You, me. The rapping echoed from within always. Dread crested tidal, and I surged, not assaulting, but the pain. fist pulverizing glass in crystalline fury that lacerated deep, crimson blooming, swift gales invaded, pinpricks of ice on my cheeks, and I vaulted the sill, pitching onto the pitch, tiles treacherous under palms. Beneath, the plunge to turf gaped abyssal, 20 feet of void onto unyielding sod. The entity pursued, writhing through the casement with timbers lament and meats tear, its mass sagging the roofline. "Stop!" I bade, slithering gutterward, heart a caged gale. This is delusion. But truth it was, recollections cascading unstaunched. The rouse in Stygian, not to summons, but shovels rasp, Mark's frenzied huffs as he toiled the clay. Forgive me, Elena, Christ forgive. The poor, viscous and final, entombing with the bloom's cloy. 3 years, 3 of putrefaction and crush, nails rending loam, knuckles battering timber. The thuds, my knuckles, my beggings, reverberating from the depths. The entity attained me, fingers noddling my locks, wrenching rearward with feral potency. Faces neared, breaths entangling, mine fevered and vital, its glacial and miasmic. Unite, it breathed, mouth grazing mine, a osculation of corruption, warmer below as one. The entity attained me, fingers noddling my locks, wrenching rearward with feral potency. Faces neared, breaths entangling, mind fevered and vital, its glacial and miasmic. Unite, it breathed, mouth grazing mine, a osculation of corruption, warmer below as one. Hush, eventual, no raps, no susurrations, solely tempest's lull and my labored draws. I clambered inward via the breach, shards gnashing knees, descending the ladder on limbs numb as wood. The basement portal sagged unlatched, stools sundered, obscurity agape as maw switch flicked, bulb humming fitful, and I confronted the nascent fissure in the slab, veining outward from stairfoot. No remains, no testament, merely the rift, and lily fragrance insinuating, frail petals uncurling in the moist. Solitary I persist, in that domicile on oak, the parting acrimonious, Mark's sole sin. He the concealer, guilt delved deeper than my frame, yet at times come 3 anti-meridium. It recurs, not knocks, treads, muted, ascending the treads toward my chamber, and in the glass, when audacity bids, my simulacrum grins rearward, gaunter diurnal, orbs eclipsed, tarrying the eve, the tendrils reclaim me absolute. Should this chronicle of glow murmurs have iced your core, then hearken to Wispar Dark, wherein umbras divulge their confidences, one rap upon a time placid slumbers, perchance not.